Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series, Interviews with Disciples and Devotees. This morning we are honored to have Srinivas with us. I've heard much about you, and of course you have been to some of the retreats that we've attended.
Yes.
But let's go back to the earliest time that you can remember hearing of Sri Aurobindo, a mother.
This was during around 85, 86 time frame when I was probably in my 16th, 17th year. One of my cousins who was a significant influence and guide in my life, he moved to Chennai from Andhra Pradesh and he discovered Sri Aurobindo. And slowly and surely, within 6 months or 1 year, I followed. And my first visit here, physically, to Pondicherry was in 1986 on Mother's birthday.
So you were only 20?
Not even 20,
Not
around
even 20
18. Yes.
My
I was
gosh.
very privileged in that sense. Yeah, 17, 18, something like that.
So you are from Hyderabad or
Basically from Andhra Pradesh.
from Andhra? Okay.
Yes, I've studied in different locations and moved around, but now settled in Hyderabad.
Ah,
Yes.
and you are in charge of the center there?
Yes, over the last decade or so, we have been, I've been a part of the management committee of the Sri Aurobindo Society Relics Center in Hyderabad, and I'm its present secretary. And it's a very old center that goes back again to the 80s.
Well, I knew Mangesh Nadkarni very well.
Yes, of course.
And Madhusudan Reddy I knew also.
Yes, in fact, the Madhusudan Reddy and Manmohan Reddy brothers have done enormous service to the movement of Mother and Sri Aurobindo in that region, in what is today the Telangana state.
Is one still alive or both are gone?
They've just, Manmohan Reddy ji just left
He just
recently.
left.
Yes. Madhusudan Reddy ji left
Yeah, I
a couple of
remember.
decades ago.
Yes,
Yeah.
couple of decades, yes.
Yeah, and I've been fortunate to be close to his children as well, Ananda Reddy ji and Chalamai Reddy ji, who runs the school there. So, very fortunate to have their association.
Yes, and I remember that Madhusudan was sort of a student of Aurobindo Basu.
Perhaps. No, he was very elder to me, so we had a reverential distance. I had a reverential distance from him, but I did benefit from much of the work he did there. He would have sadhaks come from Pondicherry there. So, for example, one of the visits of Sri M.P. Panditji, I vividly remember, and I was close to him, so I was fortunate to be there during his visit to Hyderabad.
And how did you meet Panditji? When you came to Pandit?
Yes.
Ah,
Panditji, Vasantiji, Sadhanaji, all of them. I was almost like a little child around them. And I also remember we had Sri Kapali Shastri's birth centenary. I think that was also in 1986. So I was able to take a few days off from my college and come here, be a part of the gathering there. It was very, very fond memories.
what is your work now?
My mainstream work was in telecommunications for a couple of decades. I spent about 10 years of my life on the East Coast in the US. I went to school there. I worked there.
Where?
College Park, University of Maryland College Park.
Very well.
So around the DC area, if you will, DC suburbs. And I worked there as well in Northern Virginia. And moved back almost around 98, 99. And about 10 years ago, I left my mainstream profession and decided to spend a little more time reading Sri Aurobindo and Mother and focus on this aspect. I almost shifted away of sorts.
Sneha tells me that you have brought many young people to Sri Aurobindo and Mother. Can you talk about that a little bit? Maybe even name some names.
Sure.
Wonderful to hear this.
Yes. In fact, my own journey As I came to Pondicherry, met Panditji, spent time with him, I was able to participate in the youth camps that were organized at that time. And that was just the beginning. That was when the youth camps were conceived by Sri Aurobindo Society and were conducted, and I was fortunate enough to attend a few of them. And obviously, they do leave a lasting impression on all aspects of your personality. So when I stationed myself in Hyderabad in around 2004 or 5, I decided to try and conduct a few camps at our Hyderabad branch. Yeah, so that was how slowly the youth started coming to the branch. And every Sunday morning, we fixed a time of around 11 o'clock. So I would be there, and the youngsters would come and we would read various books relating to our sadhana, our life, our way of spirituality and everything. And the gathering would range somewhere, sometimes just 2 to sometimes up to 15 or 20. And that was how it started, and it went on almost continuously for about 7-8 years. Every Sunday we would be there. And that was really a good foundation. And that was the time that Sneha and another close friend of hers, Harshita, they were children. They were barely in their 10th grade. So they all would come, and we would read from the collected works of the mother and some of the books of M.P. Panditji, and discuss a little bit, and on important occasions, whether it is Siddhi Day or whether it is Mother's birthday, and we would try and exchange notes. And meditation gradually also became a part of it. And that's how the group kind of grew. And many of the youngsters of those days are now middle-aged, and some of them married with children. We have Indrajit Singh, who is based in Hyderabad again, and someone who has been very close to our work. And like that, we have a few. And also over time, my work also expanded nationally in a way. Having done these camps, I was asked to see if we could kind of train more devotees across the country who could then go and reach out to the youth. So over the last 5 years, working with Shiva Kumar of Sri Aurobindo Society, and another dear friend, Sri Arun Naik ji, who is in Noida, the three of us kind of put together material to train different people over several years, and almost 150 people we have been able to train. And in the 3-4 years before COVID, we were able to reach out to around 6,000 youth across the country. So it's kind of it just happened that way. It's as if Mother just put me there, and it unfolded by itself. And what started as an aspiration to do something in Hyderabad for 20-30 children kind of expanded and went on. And I'm also very close to Anahita, whom you have spoken to. Yes. She and I have been collaborating where we could, and she does some fantastic work with youth in Bombay.
She does,
Yes.
She brings a group here 3 or 4 times a year.
Yes.
You know about that, young children.
And I've met some of her group. I was a part of the groups that she conducted in Bombay, 1 or 2 of them, and in online we have been in touch with some of the youth there. So
I'd like to ask you a little bit about your experiences in Orville. The vibrancy of Orville and the aesthetics of Orville are something that appeal very much to me and my wife. We both are drawn to nature, and therefore Orville is a natural part of our life. For almost a decade, between the Christmas and New Year time, she and I would spend our annual vacation there. And it's been it's so much a part of who we are. And being in Matri Mandir is, of course, very special. And
we do try and volunteer when we get an opportunity. And as I was mentioning to you, we had the opportunity to serve at Matri Mandir in one of our visits, which was when we look back, it's one of the greatest privileges of our life.
You were in the chamber?
Yes.
Serving?
Yes.
How?
Cleaning.
Cleaning?
Yes, in the
Very
evening.
Wonderful.
So it was, what can one say? We have all been there, and it is a place of silence. That the silence that one experiences there is so profound, and somehow this aspect of silence is also something that resonates with me very deeply. So being in that silence, absorbing it, and letting that silence almost enter every pore of one's being, and just becoming that is a beautiful, beautiful experience.
Have you met many people there in Orville? Do you know some of the people?
Not very many. Srinivas Murthy is someone that I've been close to for a very long time.
Tell me a little bit about your relationship. Because he's very special to me, as he's probably told you.
He is indeed. During my school days, Srinivas Murthy and I got to know each other. He's a few years elder to me, so he was in his college and I was in school, and we had a close group of friends. And we kind of started our spiritual journey together in a way. We both took initiation into transcendental meditation, which was quite popular in the early 80s.
In those days, yes.
Yeah, Maharshi Mahesh Yogis.
Yes.
And we kind of took the courses there. We meditated. We attended their advanced retreats. And we together, almost during the same time of 85, 86, discovered Mother and Sri Aurobindo. And came to Pondicherry, and since then we have been very close. And personality-wise, we are very different.
Oh, really?
We are very different.
In what ways?
Well, my own approach has mostly been perhaps sculpted by the Western education and the MBA and all of that. So you kind of, I feel, or rather, let me put it this way. Let me go back a couple of steps.
Okay.
One of the things that I did as I started my journey with Mother and Sri Aurobindo as I was a student was I started reading the little book, The Mother, and particularly the 4 powers. I would just read one power every day and just go on like that. And it went on like that. Without a pre-plan, it went on like that for a few years. And that probably, as I was probably to realize many years later, chiseled many aspects of my personality and my style of working. So my approach, and the MBA comes in to supplement it, is have a vision, have an idea, try to look far into the future, then develop the steps towards it in a methodical way and try your best to execute. This has been my way of working mostly. And Srinivas Murthy is very distinct in that sense. He is a harmonizer and a connector. His personality is very soft and fluid and gentle. And he flows, and the direction is clear for him, but the meandering, he lets it happen spontaneously as he works with people, which I think is a very, very special
Yes, it is.
talent. And I think it's particularly suited to his role in Orville.
Definitely.
Because having seen him in that role for now almost 2+ decades,
Yes,
2.5 decades,
yes.
I admire him, how he handles the very, very tricky situations which call for a very high degree of flexibility and a certain inner connection with the other person, even if you disagree. I mean, this is a big part of who he is.
Thank you for telling me that. That's extremely important, because right now we have a new secretary. Do you know her?
I have heard of her.
And she's very dynamic.
Yes.
She is learning more and more of Mother and Sri Aurobindo, very deeply.
And I believe she worked closely with Sri Kiriji earlier also.
Very much so.
Yes,
Very
yes.
much so.
I happened to see Kiriji a few times, and he guided me in a few things, and I'm happy to know that she was someone who worked with him, because the presence of the mother was very palpable when I was around Sri Kirit Bhai. Very respected person and someone who really carried the vibrations. I met him a couple of months prior to his passing here, and I remember when I walked out of that room, just to absorb what I had received, I just sat down right there for 10-15 minutes, just receiving it. Yeah, so I'm happy to hear that Jayanti ji is someone who has worked closely with Kiriji.
When you were young, who of the ashram elders did you meet?
Well, this is always something that is very special when I recall and remember. Sri M.P. Panditji was a very significant influence in my life. Many times I sat in his house for meditation in the evenings. Though at that time, as an exuberant 18-year-old, one really didn't understand what meditation could be or should be when you're around someone of his stature, we would still rush and be there. And Sri Panditji also took personal interest in my well-being and guided me. So that was a privilege. I took personal guidance from him on a few important things that really gave direction to my life. And his books brought me an understanding of Sri Aurobindo and Mother and the core teachings. At 18 or 19, reading Sri Aurobindo was not something one could do easily, at least I could not. And the essence of the teaching was very much there as a part of the books. So I read many volumes of his, and that helped me consolidate the teaching. And as I graduated to Sri Aurobindo's and Mother's works, then naturally, you already have much of the essence, so it flows. Then I was fortunate to have Sri Champaklalji's darshan many times.
Oh.
Yes, and I still remember not being acutely aware of his physical condition and fragile nature of his situation at that time. I even took a book, Champaklal Speaks.
Yes.
And I requested him to write something, which he so lovingly did, even though he was of advanced years, and it was an effort for him to write something. So kind of him. And
he did go to the U.S.
Yes.
Were you there then?
No. I was. When I think of Champaklalji, his eyes still are very vivid. When I look back, extreme love, lot of love, radiance and softness. I don't know how to, that was what I
said it very well, very well. Did you meet Nolini?
No, I came a few months after his passing, just a few months. And Nirodha, many of us saw him many times, though I maintained a very respectful distance because I don't know. I mean, there are some of the people I know who later I discovered were very close to him. For me, he was very stern, so I kind of stayed away.
He gave that impression to many, but he wasn't so.
That's what I learned later. That's what I learned later to my dismay. I could have just gone and sat near his door and he would have welcomed me, So that's what I learned later. Sri Vijay Bhai is someone, again, having been in the youth camps, I was under his direct influence and someone who helped me in a lot of different ways. So these are the names that stand out prominently. As I mentioned to you, Vasanti ji and
Yes.
Sadhana ji, they look at me as their own child in a way. So that is all really a privilege. That's a real privilege.
What amongst Sri Aurobindo's books move you the most?
It's hard to answer that precisely, but I will share.
Take your time. We have time.
Sometimes I guess it's a process of realizing it retroactively. Unintendedly, when I look back, perhaps I did a few years of the sadhana of the small book of the mother. It just happened that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a book that I have found to be an incredibly beautiful and astonishing consolidation of integral yoga. When I reach out, I use that book as a means of introducing Sri Aurobindo and Mother. I find Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga, all of it synthesized in it. Then there is the important initial work, probably the lifelong work anyway, but still aspiration, rejection, and surrender. How Sri Aurobindo brings it together. How Sri Aurobindo delineates the physical, vital, and mental, and the difficulties of each of them. He clearly specifies there that we have to look inside and discover and work. In our yoga, we look at money very differently. And that is all summarized there. It's beautifully summarized there. And then
in the mother also.
In the mother, yeah.
Yes,
in the fourth chapter.
Right.
Going very simply, beautifully, in 4 pages, it is all summarized there. Then, of course, the 6th chapter, which in the initial portion brings in elements of life divine and synthesis of yoga. And in the central section, the 4 powers. And all of this, to me, that book alone is, like I said, a beautiful consolidation of integral yoga. And the book has a mantric nature to it, where if we are drawn to something that is written there, and we really want to manifest that truth, if we just read that passage again and again and again, I found that it opens things and things manifest in you. The aspiration becomes a realization, at least to a certain degree. So that is a book that I not only have found to be incredibly useful in my life, but also that is something that I share with many youngsters, and many of them have benefited from it. Then today when I see essays on the Gita is something that is, again, another variation, but a different summarization of integral yoga. Incredible, book, and almost these are manuals of sadhana of sorts. And in the Hyderabad center, for many years after Sri Nadkarni ji left, there was a vacuum of anyone speaking in English. So in that context, I took up Synthesis of Yoga as a lecture series. And I was able to offer almost for 2 years, and we covered the entire Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga section fully. And that was an incredible experience because...
in English?
In English,
Yes.
Yes. And summarizing each chapter gave me the deepening needed. One is one reads page after page over a period of time and goes on and takes its own time. There is a beauty to that. And the process of taking each chapter, reading it once, and then summarizing it actually helped me learn and absorb and also communicate better, perhaps. So, I mean, I guess we have spoken of all the,
Oh, I haven't asked you about Savitri.
And then there is Savitri. And then there is...
That was the next question.
Absolutely. I mean, It is I'm still going through the journey of Savitri. Have been through through the work several times. I've tried to make notes of specific lines and passages which I could probably memorize, but it's not been that easy for me somehow. Maybe it's the age, I do not know, but I try, and it is an ongoing process. I'm hoping that I could drink the rasa of Savitri even more in the coming years. Yes.
Have you had the opportunity to access any of our websites, Mother and Sri Aurobindo.in or Mother and Sri Aurobindo?
Normally, my access to websites has been event-driven, in the sense when I need a particular passage or when I need a particular topic, that is when I try and go out. So I have accessed the websites. The incarnateword.in also is something that I have used and benefited from. There is a website with Russian origin.
Yes,
Are you?
yes.
So that is again a place where I have.
So you've touched all three of the main ones.
And Sri Aurobindo Sadhana Peetham also. I have visited their website a few times.
Have you been there to Lodi?
Yes, I was privileged to visit there during one of my stays in California. Yeah.
Which brings me to the question of what you see in the world today related to Sri Aurobindo's yoga. All the difficulties that we are facing, the COVID situation, deep state. How do you feel things are going?
There are two aspects that we will try to take up. One is what you've brought up, the world itself, and then the 150th year, which is upon us.
Very good. Yes, very good.
In one way, my work and approach to the world situation and the social situation has been kind of tiered, not dichotomized, but tiered. So there is the individual sadhana element and how and what we discuss within the devotee groups and how we communicate with each other and the values that we bring in, the code of conducts that we bring in this. Naturally, when we expand the sphere, many of these things kind of peter away and we don't see that happening. As far as India is concerned, I am of the opinion that we are actually rediscovering Indian independence in the last 8-10 years in a deeper way. What we received was a political independence that was constrained by cultural misappropriation and conscious deviation from our cultural values. I believe India is
by the occupiers, basically.
By the occupiers and those who were in power,
Yes.
who consciously worked on
those
it.
in power also.
And they consciously did that. It wasn't an accident. It was a deliberate deviation from the ideals that Indian culture and civilization have always stood for. I am relieved, irrespective of the limitations of the individuals involved in the work today, and no doubt there are many. But I believe the direction is right. I believe India is looking into her soul and bringing out something deep which will have a lasting impact probably over a century. I believe we are at that point of inflection in India. On the world stage, India is emerging, but the emergence is significantly constrained by the Western and the Oriental big bear that is a neighbor to us, and the support by the internal operators. So India is struggling in that sense. And to really flower fully what has just begun. We may need another 20 years before we can say that India has stabilized at a higher level. We are still in this nascent stage. And going to the deep state, well, I believe in the words of our gurus that India is meant to be the guru of the world, and over millennia, we have been a perennial source of light. This is what Sri Aurobindo's phrase is. And I believe that is our destiny, and we will fulfill our destiny. And the current reorientation of our country towards our natural and Sanatana Dharma is something that is very reassuring to me. Yeah. And then coming to Corona, COVID, all of these difficulties, and the 150th year.
And the U.S. also, because you've been there quite some time.
Yes. I mean, the tumult that we saw in the last 5 years in U.S., I feel is a clash of forces, and when we look at the Trump years, the Obama years, and now the Biden years, you kind of wonder: is one more oriented towards the truth than the other, or is it only the representation that is varying, but the sinister or the deeper element of the work continues? And there is no doubt that among the contenders for superpower today, United States of America embodies the best value systems that are suitable for the human race at a global level. Notwithstanding all the other shortcomings there are among the contenders, if we are to see.
Which is why Mother's comment is so important.
About
that
the collaboration.
It will be India and America that will lead us
Absolutely.
into the new world.
Absolutely. The collaboration between these two cultures is essential. And to that extent, I sincerely pray and hope that the dawning of the so-called Chinese era is delayed as long as possible, because simply so far what India has seen is mostly deception, and so has the world.
Yes.
At its heavy cost. So I hope that the US era continues for many more decades, and that India, and like you said, like we collaborate on the outer physical and structural manifestation, the US can help, and the glow of the soul and the value systems comes from India.
You had mentioned much of your work with the young people. What do you feel about the youth in the world today?
As a race, I think there is a step forward compared to where I saw myself as a youngster to what I see today. I believe there has been a tectonic shift in a progressive way. There is more openness, more seeking, and a more, how would one say, a determined quest among the youth. This is what I sense. And that is probably the first step in the right direction. A reflection of that, I'll drift off topic for a little bit. If we look at the United Nations Millennium Development Goals, MDG, most of them were human-centric. There should be alleviation in poverty, there should be alleviation in a million things associated with humans. But today when we look at SDG, there is a concern about life on planet. There is a concern about life in water. There is concern about well-being of men, women, children, and animals, and climate. So there has been a shift in our own outlook at the global level from being human-centric to planet-centric. And I believe that did not happen accidentally. That happened because the younger generation saw things differently. Having been in management and leadership roles, 20 years ago, the person who came to us when we interviewed them, the concern was, what is my role, what is my future, and how much are you paying me? today when we talk to the millennials, when we are hiring them, the question is, how are you serving a larger purpose? Is the organization aligning itself to something bigger? And this is a welcome change. This is a
Very
beautiful
much so.
change. Yeah.
Very much so.
In fact, as a part of Mother's work, I had an opportunity over a few years to also take integral management to the companies. Even in Pondicherry, we did a workshop for Toyota, and they had come here and we did a workshop for them on integral management. So the idea is to take up Sri Aurobindo's message to the business, various echelons in the business, and kind of help them see that triple bottom line is fine, but you have to have even a vaster understanding of how you manage people. Because most of the theories about people management today are around a certain set of skills and a certain set of processes. They aren't necessarily around inner transformation for long-term success, which actually is the only mantra which works. I'm happy to see that some of the organizations now are slowly adapting it, that when you manage people, the equation is far more symmetric. It is not asymmetric as was the case when I was growing up and I was working. And we took the message of the Mother and the Master about various aspects of transformation of consciousness and applied it to the field of business. And said that the only sustainable way of growing an organization for productivity is by working at the consciousness level. And as a part of that, we included the 4 aspects and how to ensure that the leadership understands these 4 aspects in a business-centered way and is able to apply them. It is not to give up something. It is more than giving up. It is actually gaining something. And not just for the leadership or for the profit, but for the entire organization. Yeah.
You mentioned a few companies that are perhaps cutting edge at this.
Yes. For example, one of my friends works in LinkedIn. She's a senior person based in Delhi, and we were talking about this, and she actually described how this transformational process is being put in place in this company. And usually when you look at the Fortune 500, it's a very percolative sort of a system. It's an indication of the change in thinking across the board.
Yes.
The best practices go, they spread around and all of that. And in the past as well, there were human-centered organizations, employee-centered organizations, but transformation-centered organizations were few.
And large scale,
And
especially few.
Yes.
So, to go back to America, have you been to some of the different centers?
The only place I actually visited was Lodi. Rest of it, I did not have a chance. In fact, I must tell you one thing about how my own stay in America unfolded.
Good.
So here I was, a 21-year-old, with no friends or relatives in America, on a plane, landing in Silicon Valley practically. My initial semester was in San Jose. So I went there. And I was walking around the campus, everything looking very different than what I was used to. And I go to the library and I was excited to see that they had the computerized bibliography to look up what you wanted. So that was the first time I was using it way back in 1989. So I said, okay, who is an Indian author that I can find here? And immediately the name popped into my mind was R.K. Narayan. Because R.K. Narayan is a very well-known author who has written many books, and he was one of my favorite authors in my childhood. So I type Narayan, enter. And what comes up is Narayan Prasad, Life in Sri Aurobindo Ashram.
I knew him very well.
You did?
Yes. I've just passed my 60th anniversary of meeting Mother.
60th.
60th.
Blessed art thou.
So, Narayan Prasad.
Narayan Prasad. And it was as if she had her hand on my shoulder all through. That was That was how it unfolded, and I was very fortunate that when I moved to University of Maryland on the West Coast, in the initial few months, I was put in touch with a devotee family who had been associated with Mother and Sri Aurobindo throughout their life, and they were about your age, was uncle, and auntie was a little younger. And every weekend I would go there. Uncle would read something, we would meditate. So she protected me and took care of me in a very beautiful way, and that kind of served as my anchor point. Shukla, Puran Shukla and Kusum Shukla, they served as my anchor point in America, rooted in Mother and Sri Aurobindo, and that was beautiful.
Oh, that's wonderful that you could share that. I want to move on to the next question, actually, which is this great evolution in the internet and the digital world. How do you see it fitting in with the yoga?
I think technology has always, as we discuss, been neutral. It is only the application and the consciousness behind the application that determines its ultimate utility. On one side, I feel grateful to be a part of this time and age. In the 1980s and 90s, I vividly remember how difficult it was to access books and information and knowledge across the globe. I grew up in a generation where if you wanted a book, sometimes you had to wait for 5 years before you could get your book here where you are. Today, we have access to many people with very high levels of consciousness. If one looks at it spiritually, intellectually, all the thinkers, their works are available, at least their talks are available, their books are available. So in that sense, I believe technology and internet in particular, which by the way happens to be my field of specialization.
Oh.
My master's thesis, and you'll have a good laugh at this, my master's thesis was writing 2 pieces of software so the 2 computers could talk to each other, which you call chatting today. So I would sit in 2 computers, code here, code there, and say hello, and wait for the hello to come on this side, and spend nights figuring out why it is not coming. So that was how I, kind of started my career, and then I built networks. America Online, I was one of the people who were in Sprint providing the infrastructure for it, building continental networks. And I moved to India and I continued to do that. So I was kind of the guy, the plumber of the internet, for some time, So, that does not necessarily bias my answer, but the free access to so much information, so much knowledge, and is something I feel is a big step in the human condition. That remote corners of India today are no longer left behind. That it is not possible for sections of humanity to be isolated and kept isolated. These are things that I believe are big steps in the human evolution. As far as the downside is concerned, every technology does bring its downside. And I believe what we have today is a phenomenal movement forward in the human evolution itself. And I'm glad to be a part of it at this stage because I am benefiting from it. I'm immensely benefiting from it. Yes. And I think on the same note, COVID has accelerated all of us towards this digital, universal digitalization. What could have probably taken half a decade or a decade happened within 2 years. That today, many people, young and old, are able to access technology, see their family with Zoom calls. All of that has changed the dynamics in a big way.
In the Life Divine, Sri Aurobindo really gives us this view of the evolution and what can happen. Where is India versus China now?
It's more of a why I kind of laughed was because my starting point when I think of the Chinese situation today is always a comment attributed to the mother, whether souls exist among the Chinese, so that kind of brings a laugh, because if that is the starting point, then where is the comparison? One aspect. But having said that, China also has been a civilization that has cradled some of the highest human values. And whether it is the writings of Confucius, or whether it is there's a path of teaching called Wu Wei. Mother also commented on it somewhere. Where
yes.
So these are things that are native to that land. So I'm not convinced that China is the CCP or the CCP is the China. I believe that there is an underlying wealth of spiritual knowledge and experience that has unfortunately been covered up, hopefully temporarily, by somewhat of an occupying elite, which for convenience purposes has removed all points of light that can allow people to congregate.
Yes.
And very harshly so. So the cultural richness of China somewhere could have provided a certain point of alignment which they did not want. So they kind of neutralized all of that. Having said that, there are predictions that China may go the Russia way. Some may disagree, some may agree. One can argue about the time frame. But I believe the sooner that happens, the better the human race is. Because then the ancient wealth of the Chinese civilization can benefit the human race, which at the moment I cannot see it. It is Faolong, that was one of the movements in China.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Brutal repression.
Absolutely.
Brutal repression in the last 2 decades. This is uncalled for.
And genocide, I understand.
And
also.
genocide in Jiangxing province.
Yes, exactly.
Uncalled for, unacceptable in 21st century. We promised as a race we would not let it happen. Today, for various reasons, we turn away. Hong Kong, the assimilation of Hong Kong, it has happened in our lifetimes. And what it was to be and what it has been is two entirely different stories. What was signed on the dotted line versus what is happening today. 100 years of freedom to be as they are. And already barely 25 years into it, it's become a puppet regime. So a lot can be said about China. I just hope that what we are seeing is something that will be blown away by the winds of time, and the real wealth will come to benefit the human race.
There must be a concern about its territorial ambitions.
No doubt. I have an interesting data point on that. China shares its boundaries roughly with around 11 to 12 countries. And China has territorial disputes with 27 countries. How is that even possible?
How is it even possible? Yes.
And that is surely a point of concern for all of us.
I'd like to close this wonderful session with you, asking you a bit about your family, your wife, if you have children.
Well,
your wife is a disciple also?
I met her during a long visit both of us had in Pondicherry, not knowing each other. She had come on a separate visit. I had come separately, both from Delhi to Pondicherry. And we met each other when we exited Matri Mandir.
Oh, my.
We both had gone to a meditation. We came out and we met each other just around the vicinity of the banyan tree. So that was how our journey started. So at that time, she was staying at the Delhi ashram. She's originally from Dehradun, and she liked the Delhi ashram very much, so she chose to stay there. And she's very close to Taradi, naturally.
Yes.
And soon after, we got married a couple of years later in Pondicherry. And we had both the traditional wedding, and then we went to Sri Aurobindo's room and exchanged rings. So it was a blessing that was solemnized in the room. It is a very big blessing Mother has given me. And we continue on the path, and we do not have children. And, now it has been about 20 plus years. And we are on the path together.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Narad.
Namaste.
Thank you for taking the time.
It was a wonderful
having me here.
morning with you.
Likewise.
Namaste all.